Have you ever had some information on the tip of your tongue that you just couldn't recall? Have you ever felt confident about performing a task that you performed several years in the past, only to miss a step? Helping people remember or recall information when they need it is what job aids are all about. In this lesson, we will learn about job aids, a performance intervention, including what is a job aid, when to apply job aids, strengths and limitations of job aids, best practices for designing job aids, and the job aid development process. Job aids, also called performance aids, are tools that package content required for task completion in a format that's readily accessible in the learning or performance environments. They support external memory so the user doesn't have to remember all the content that is a subject of the job aid. They are distinguished from other tools in that they don't provide content or information. Examples of job aids are all around us: written job descriptions and manuals, how-to guides, computer application help functions, and so forth. Tools that don't house information are not job aids, such as hand tools and toaster ovens. Job aids can be used in the learning environment, performance environment, or both. In the learning environment, job aids can be used in conjunction with other training materials to help the student master their learning objectives. First, a job aid can be referenced in the training material to be used in practice just as it will be in the work environment. This is called reference-based training. For example, the checklist will be used in the performance environment to help a mechanic remember all the steps of repairing a machine. The same job aid can be used in the learning environment when they are learning those steps. Giving students an opportunity to use a job aid in the learning environment will help them transfer the knowledge of how to use it into the performance environment. This also makes it more likely that they will use a job aid. Also in the learning environment, a job aid can be used to provide support to beginners while they are learning a complex task that must be memorized for use in the performance environment. In this circumstance, the job aid is used to reduce the cognitive load of the beginner and then fade it out as they gain experience. For example, a flight course might use a job aid for a student to learn the steps used to land a plane, but will be faded out as the student gain practice flying in a simulator and then a plane. Finally, job aids are used in the performance environment where they provide the most value because they assist the individual in performing a job task. The job aid might be a complete procedure, some key information needed to perform the task. Another example of a job aid is a placard used to inform passengers in an airplane how to use their seatbelt. A limitation of job aids is they're not appropriate for tasks that must be performed in too short of a time span for there to be time to be referenced, or when tasks have many unknowns that require an individual to process information quickly. For example, in the last section, a task like landing an airplane must be performed from memory because it's impractical and dangerous to have the pilot distracted by reading a job aid. Also, performing job aids should not be used in sight of the audience when credibility is important in communication. Example is a sales pitch or public speech. Performing surgery is another example where it's both impractical to refer to job aids and credibility is important. Job aids are usually less expensive, less time consuming, and more effective than training or training alone with appropriate tasks. As mentioned previously, job aids can be used in learning or performance environment, helping students learn the knowledge, skills, and or to assist with transfer into the performance environment. Job aids provide memory support to reduce cognitive load, allowing students to remember more information than they could have memorized on their own. Another area of either strength or weakness for individual job aids is related to how well they are designed. Job aids, like other instructional materials, must be designed using adherence to their objectives in conjunction with characteristics of the audience, organization, and environment in order to maximize their effectiveness. They should also be utilize best practices and design principles to aid the individual in performing the task by having just the relevant information formatted in an effective manner to allow efficient use of the information in the performance environment. According to the book Efficiency in Learning, below are best practices in designing job aids. These are to be applied whenever practical, given the circumstances. First, use visuals. Visuals are easier to process mentally than text and aid and transfer due to the representation of objects in the performance environment. If text is needed, integrate it into the visual instead of having it separate to avoid split attention. Keep them simple. Avoid redundancy by including only the minimum information needed to know. Design them to work in conjunction with training. Test the prototypes. Perform an evaluation set to make sure they work, get feedback, and adjust them if needed. Integrate into the performance environment. This avoids split attention of having the user reference a second page for information. This is especially practical in computer-based performance environments. There are several versions of the job aid development process. Essentially, they would involve similar steps to instructional design or performance improvement models. First, identify the performance gap, analysis of the task, learner, and environment. Determine if a job aid is appropriate as a solution or part of a solution for the performance gap. Determination if job aid is the best, what type of job aid to use. Evaluation, pilot, get feedback, and revise, and then use the feedback for revisions. The first step is to identify a performance gap. Performance gap is identification and the difference between the desired state and the status quo. For example, an accuracy rate of entering customer data might be 85%. Currently, and the company would like to see it at 98%. The gap is 13% difference. The next step is analysis. This involves gathering information on the task, person, and work environment to identify the root cause. Job aids might not be the best solution for root causes such as poor supervision, inadequate job tools, poor motivation, or other environmental factors. The next step is determining if job aid is the right intervention, a part or a package of interventions. Remember that situation where job aid should and should not be applied from earlier in the lesson. Poor or no job instructions are a task that is performed infrequently, where time doesn't require memorization and there is no perception of credibility importance, or situations that likely could be improved with job aids in a performance environment. The next step is to determine the type of job aids. The various types of job aids, examples, and when to use each type, and how to develop these various types of job aids will be covered in future lessons. For now, the link to the ASTD provides a reference page on this topic for your review and use. The next and final stage is a tryout. To try out the job aid with a pilot group of the attendance audience to evaluate its effectiveness. Finally, from the feedback from the tryout should be incorporated into revisions for the final version of the job aid. The job aid can then be implemented. I hope you enjoyed this introductory lesson on job aids.